Hey, what's up everyone? I know I'm probably late to the game on this video, but Bandai has officially reached out to the Battle Spirit Saga community to get feedback on a potential ban list, something that I think a lot of us probably thought wasn't going to come anytime soon. But since that's looking a little bit more promising now, I thought I would hop on here, talk about some of my thoughts, what I hope to gain out of a potential ban list, and take a look at what some of the community feedback was, because there was quite a bit of it. A lot of the conversation has been centered around two cards, Big Bang Energy and Great Sapphire Labyrinth. Both of these cards allowed the top two decks of the Set 4 format to cheat out their boss spirits and accelerate the game at a rate that most other decks just could not keep up with. So let's take a look at these cards, plus a few others, talk a little bit about them and what I hope to see from Bandai. Let's start with Big Bang Energy. This card rewards red for playing riskier than they should probably be able to get away with, because you want to take that life damage in order to reduce the cost of the Star Dragons in your hand. And with the amount of card draw that red has, it's pretty safe to assume that red is going to have some amount of combo pieces in their hands, right? And as somebody who played Ira in 2 tournaments over Set 4, yeah, I mean, Nova and Big Bang and some kind of Seagworm or other Seagworm just always finds a way into your hand. So how do you deal with this card? If you look at the community feedback, most people are calling for an outright ban of this card, and it's hard not to agree with that, I have to admit, but I think at the same time you have to take a look at what happens to Star Dragons if this card is completely eliminated from the deck. Big Bang Energy is intended to cheat out all Star Dragons in your hand, so yes, that does include Nova and Ira, but for a color that does not naturally ramp cores, I think this card is really important because it's just not manageable to pay 3 every single time you want to put down a key spirit from your deck, and that's just assuming you have maximum reduction on board. If you're playing from behind, then Big Bang Energy doesn't really become any more of a valuable card in your hand. Without this card, I think Star Dragons are next to unplayable, because I think it becomes one of the most core inefficient decks out there to play. Now, it's not like red doesn't have other options out there. I think red mid-range, or maybe red-purple mid-range, is probably positioned to do pretty well this set, but I'm also very biased here. Star Dragons are my favorite. It is my favorite archetype in the game to play, so maybe take this next bit with a grain of salt if you are really gunning for Big Bang to be just completely banned. I actually think Big Bang is best suited for an errata that both prevents you from reducing the cost of Ascend Spirits in your hand and also potentially limiting the amount of cards that you can play off of this card. Because, I mean, I agree that tempo swing that this card can provide is pretty crazy, but in my view, Star Dragons as an archetype just cannot exist without this card, and I would hate for the deck to completely fall off. Next, let's look at Great Sapphire Labyrinth. This card is arguably the reason why Set 4 Hydra decks went largely unchanged over the course of Set 4, because its level 1 effect only ramps when playing aberrations, right? And ramp is good, who doesn't love it? But it's this Nexus's level 2 effect and its lack of any meaningful drawback that really pushes this card into problematic territory. Instead of paying additional cores or sending cores to the void or destroying the Nexus or leaving it permanently exhausted until it left the field, all you have to do is turn this Nexus sideways and it stands back up next turn, and Hydra can use it as fuel to raid. To me, it would have just been far more balanced to utilize any other kind of blue strategy, and also way more exciting, right? Blue has natural core ramp, it has, you know, self Nexus destruction, think Cthulhu Shark, and it has a ton of Nexus recursion, so it could have used any of that, but instead, all you have to do is turn it sideways. So to me, I just don't think it's balanced in that regard. So with that being said, I would settle for an errata on this card because I do think it allows for some interesting deck building. But if I'm being perfectly honest, I think I would rather just see this card banned. This card single-handedly allows blue to play at an incredibly fast speed. And I mean, I understand the current version of the deck is more of a high roll deck, but if you consider the fact that blue got, I mean, another insane aberration promo that allows you to ramp on both players' turns, I just don't think Great Sapphire Labyrinth is needed for Hydra to be a successful deck anymore. I think dealing with both of these cards best addresses the current format, but I do want to quickly go over a couple of cards that the community pointed out and give my take. EJ made a really good point on Facebook talking about Phantasmal Paradise and set 3 Fabled Beasts deck, saying Yellow Fabled Beast felt like an utterly unstoppable threat, and then going on to say, the deck did not become less powerful, but cards to defeat it became more accessible. I think there's a really good point to be had here, considering the larger conversation is about banning the card that gave access to defeating this deck, right? Big Bang Energy. I think you could also argue that yellow doesn't have a great answer to Hydra. I mean, you have Lightning Arrow to stop it from swinging 3 times, Key of Intrusion. Maybe if you can already kind of knock it down from the 10k BP. But generally speaking, I don't think yellow has a great answer. I think that being said, I would be willing to let Phantasmal Paradise live for a little bit longer, mainly because I think it's one of the reasons why red is going to stick around this set. But I do think that if this card goes unchecked, I think people are going to grow very tired of it. Next, let's talk about Floodstream. So many people pointed out that Floodstream being unlimited and Volcanic Break being limited to 1 doesn't really make sense, and I agree with that. It never really made sense to me why Volcanic Break was limited, because you always had to pay the Soul Core, and Flame Disaster is a thing now which does the same thing while you know, costing more. But I think Floodstream is perfectly fine as it is. This card does make it difficult for token decks to exist, which is kind of a bummer because I do enjoy token decks myself. But aggro decks, on the other hand, were very successful in set 4, and this is one of the best cards to deal with them, and if this card is banned or limited, it would only make those decks even better. And trust me, you do not want to live in a world where aggro's Achilles heel is protected by our attempt to further balance the meta. So I think this card is fine. I think Floodstream is fine. If you do not want to play in another do you have the out meta, then I think we would all do well to just accept this card as it is. Trilogy on X was not the only person to bring up Thorn Prison. Thorn Prison was another card that was huge during set 4 that kind of fell off during set 4, and I'm not entirely convinced that it needs to be hit because of how the game has changed. As it's mentioned in their post, Thorn Prison is a very flexible defensive and offensive card. Yes, however, it does very little to mitigate the damage from an attacking double symbol spirit, which is why the meta moved away from Thorn Prison and towards something like Deadly Balance, or why Dream Bomb stuck around. Look, Thorn Prison is definitely a good card because it can target any refreshed spirit, unlike most newer cards where you're limited to targeting a spirit with X amount of symbols or colors on them. But I think the need for this card, especially out of color, is just not what it once was. Also on X, Jay mentioned banning Mega Beast Fortress Namagard. Again, they were not the only one to mention banning or doing something with this card, but I've always been conflicted about what to do with Elephant, because on one hand, yes, the card does provide an incredible advantage for white, but on the other hand, I think white is also allowed to have good cards. Elephant is a necessary card for white because it's one of the few in-color draw options that it even has. I think cutting this card would make the deck way less consistent than I think it arguably already is, and in a similar tone to banning Big Bang Energy for Star Dragons, I'm just afraid the meta would be way less diverse without this card. My suggestion here is that if you are expecting to see Elephant, find a way to play around it because it's not an unbeatable card. Speaking of Elephant, Royce back on Facebook addressed the one that's still in the room, asking about the nerf to tournament prize money. I'm glad to see the community is still around to remind Bandai of their poor advertising. Finally, let's address the current ban list because people definitely had some thoughts here. Number 1, Axe Spider. Axe Spider can stay on the list. I think indestructible cards are awful, and just because they fit into the meta doesn't mean they should be welcome back. I think the counters for this card are few, and bringing this card back into the format would just make deck building so boring because you're always having to play into it and around it. To me, the format is better off without it, and the best that I can hope for is that by the time set 6 rolls around, I do not have to eat my words. Number 2, Netherworld Depths can stay on the ban list for the same reason that Phantasmal Paradise can join it, in that the card draw for their respective colors is just not needed. Plus, I think a lot of people forget how broken the level 2 effect is. Dark, Coffin Cavern pretty much does the same thing. Yeah, it's only for your first spirit gets cursed, but I think that it's a way more balanced way to do it. Plus, that card combos better with other cards. So yeah, I just don't think there's a need for another World of Depths to come back into the meta. Number 3, and I already kind of mentioned it, but Volcanic Break. I don't think anything is going to happen to this card because we just got Flame Disaster, which does the exact same thing, and I think people are probably just better off playing more copies of Flame Disaster, or maybe you just play one less copy of Flame Disaster and one copy of Volcanic Break, but I don't think anything needs to happen to this card because I think it'll just create bloat within the color. And to wrap things up, number 4, Ovi Raptidon. I think this card is perfectly fine. I can't imagine asking to ban or limit Floodstream and then also ask for this card to come off of the ban list either. This card was put on the ban list for the same reason that a lot of people are asking Big Bang Energy to get put on the ban list, because it accelerates a big spirit coming down before other people have a chance to deal with it. So I think it's perfectly fine where it is. If you think pterosaurs are unplayable without Ovi Raptidon, then I just don't think you're trying hard enough. Well, there you have it. Those are my thoughts. I was really happy to see so many people come out and contribute to this conversation, and I hope Bandai does take the time to read through these comments and listen to people, because I think it's clear that, you know, even though we are a small community of players that play this game, we are a very impassioned one. The best part of the game, at least to me, is the deck building, but a lot of the creativity in this game is removed when decks like Ira and Hydra get to dominate the field in the way that they are. I do want to point out that I don't think it's Ira and Hydra that are contributing to this mess, but it's the cards like Big Bang Energy and Great Sapphire Labyrinth in their current state that are preventing people from being able to come out and make really unique and creative decks. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. I wasn't planning on this being the next video on this channel, but since everyone got so involved and so engaged in this conversation, then I thought I would go ahead, get on here, and throw out my 2 cents. Go ahead and leave a comment down below with what you hope to see from a ban list. I would love to read it, but I'll go ahead and leave you there. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.